Well, hello, class. This next class, the theory is going to be focused on section number 8 in your book, and that is on decision making. What I thought I would do is use the theory of this particular section for our lecture series, which will go from 4:15 to, say, 5 o'clock. From 5 on, okay, we'll take a short break. We'll do the presentations for the second case study, and whatever it is that we don't finish, we can continue the following week. As you know, we're winding down the semester, so a lot needs to be done, and we're getting it done. But on decision making, I want to talk about that first a little bit. What is decision making about? We're going to introduce the concepts of decision making. If you go to your book on page 267, you will note that decision making has to do with how individuals and organizations collectively make what we call programmed and non-programmed decisions. And we'll talk through that piece a little bit. I want to bring your attention to figure 8.1 on page 267. It talks about the rational decision-making process. And there are different approaches to decision-making, almost like doing an internal and external SWOT. There's rational decision-making. There's the behavior of economics, there's organizational psychology, and there's what we refer to as naturalism. So all these things come together in the decision-making process. Pay attention to the bottom of page 268. It talks about improving decision-making, and there are collectively 6 steps in the decision-making process. So please read through that. You know, just like with biases and prejudices and things that influence our decision-making, we want to improve on how we can overcome making bad decisions by overcoming biases and errors. So page 271 and 272, I believe, are going to talk about what we saw in that diagram earlier here. Sorry about that. Figure 8-1 on page 267. The next thing was organizational psychology, and that was the third thing over, if you remember, on that table, a figure, whatever it is, on how we base our decision making, and then finally, naturalistic decision making. We want to always make better decisions, but how do we do that without having other things influence us? You know, external things that can kind of cloud the way we think about making decisions. And look at the case study on your own. I don't know if we'll have time to cover it in class, but on page 279, there's a section there, leading the decision-making process. And then pay attention to figure 1 on page 281. That's decoding how to decide. Now, why do I think that's significant? Because the whole process of decision making, with all its influences and biases and everything that can kind of get in the way, maybe even emotionally, of how we make a decision. If you look at this figure 1 on page 281, it goes into a 4-segment breakdown of composition, context, communication, and control. Look at those 4 things and read about what they have to say in the decision-making process. You know, a lot of times people are going to think differently than you do when making decisions. They're going to give you a hard time. How well can you back up why a decision should hold validity and should have content that is appropriate to reaching the goal that involves making the decision? In other words, what is the quintessential message that you're trying to get out there in the decision-making process? On page 288 and 289, they go into what we call, this is table 1, and table 1 actually is continued from page 287, and it's really on best practice decision making. It's a case study by Paul Nutt and UTT. If you get a chance to go through that, it really goes into the logistics chronologically and sequentially about avoiding traps when using best practices and making decisions. And then it goes to table 2 on page 290. And there are alternatives to making decisions. And we already talked about creating a culture of making good decisions. I know that we covered that in the past. You know, do we have a culture where individuals are allowed to say things and do things? And I think that's important. But what I am going to do is finally, for this section, I want you to take a look at the video I'm going to put up. But it goes along with on page 300, how temporary organizations promote dysfunctional goals. Promote dysfunctional goal pursuit. And it goes into the case of the 1996 Mount Everett disaster by Kimberly Elsbach and Marcus Helgren. I think this is something really to go through in this particular section that can be extremely helpful when you have to make decisions sometimes you don't want to make, but you need to make them. We're talking about Mount Everest here as a point of survival. And, you know, I find this to be quite significant. So look at the, along conjunction with this information, look at the YouTube video that I'm going to put up on this. So that's about it, guys, for the theory part of what we're going to go through in class about decision making. Please, please, at least glimpse over this stuff. Look it over best you can. And then we will, like I said, when we get to about 5, I would say after a short break or after 5 o'clock, say around 5:15 to 5:30, 6:30 or so. We'll see how many presentations we can make. Again, keep your presentation like 5 or 6 minutes on the case study. You should be able to do that quite well. And then whatever we don't finish, we'll finish the following week. Okay? So that's it. See you on Monday.